Jewelry Design Center. We want to be your jeweler for life.
Was your name inspired by the song at all?
You know, well, the song was inspired, of course, by the Republican martyr who was executed in 1916. And I always kind of assumed that it was, but then I realised it was a family name. So my uncle, who actually moved from Ireland to England, worked in the shipyards in Great Yarmouth, was Kevin Barry. And he had a kid, Kevin Barry, who actually passed away in a motorcycle crash about a year to the day before I was born. So I was named after that Kevin Barry.
Oh, yeah.
But going back as a family name, I think it would have been a Republican family name in the 1920s in Ireland as kind of a tribute to the guy who was executed.
Yeah, 'cause that's one of the most famous.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to the song anyway, it probably made it a lot more famous. But yeah, I mean, you could be named Michael Collins or Bobby Sands. I mean, maybe they might be a little more famous than Kevin Barry.
There are a lot of Kevin Barrys out there. I tell you.
Yeah. It's when Bill Foley too. I'll find that Bill Foley.
You're not alone, Bill.
I ran the New York City Marathon in 2009, and I got third in the Bill Foley category. There's two other Bill Foleys running it. So,
yeah. I was as a young man in Cork City. I was signing on for a while on the dole. I'd get at the Labour Exchange, getting unemployment, and at my hatch there was 11 Kevin Barrys because there was always confusion about who was due to be paid. You know?
Yeah,
so
it was kind of hard to stand out with a name like Kevin Barry, or maybe you get more attention with a name like Kevin Barry. I don't know.
It's a bit of a one you have to live up to in some kind of way, you know.
Yeah, and it's not the greatest. Not my favorite of the Rebel songs, but it's one of the most memorable ones. But I love Rebel songs.
A lot of people know it. A lot of people immediately break into song on being introduced to me.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Because my favorite time of the year is the 2 hours after the St. Paddy's Day parade in Butte down at the depot. It used to be at the Silver Dollar, but the Dublin Gulch Band, they play at the depot for 2 hours or so, and they sing some Black and Tan.
I've never been to Butte for St. Patrick's Day. I imagine it's a very quiet and reserved kind of affair.
Well, it's really kind of we call it amateur hour. There's a lot of college kids coming in, you know. But I quit drinking 18 years ago, so it makes me I don't.
You can take it all in more so.
Yeah, but just as that music though, I mean, I always go and I always yell Black and Tans, damn it, because when I hear the song Black and Tans, I feel like I could fight Mike Tyson, But there's a lot of great. I mean, I love listening to Irish Rebel songs. There's just so many good ones.
What's great about Irish traditional music as well, Irish folk music, is it keeps reinventing itself at every generation, you know. And actually, the last few years, there's a lot of new kind of bands doing it in Ireland, in all the cities and all the towns, and it's kind of changing all the time. So it's not just kind of stuck in the old songs and the old traditions. It keeps kind of reinventing it. It's nice. Yeah,
the Young Dubliners used to come here. They're a really good band. They come here every once in a while, and of course, I love the Dropkick Murphys and
all those guys. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So you've been to Butte, but this is not your first time to Butte.
It's my second visit.
Yeah, you're here for in the middle of about a week-long visit?
Yeah, just coming towards the end of a week-long visit, and my first visit was exactly 26 years ago in October 1999.
Okay.
As a very young guy. Well, I was just turning 30. I wasn't that young.
Yeah.
But I got a bee in my bonnet about this Butte, Montana story I'd heard in West Cork.
Yeah.
In Ireland, about the miners who had moved over here in kind of late 1880s into the 1890s. I was trying to write a novel, back home in Ireland. I had no idea what I was going to write a novel about. And I was working as a freelance journalist in Cork City, in Ireland's second biggest city. It was fine, but I wanted to write fiction. So I saved up my money and I bought myself a kind of a summer of 3 months. And I had a little trailer, a caravan on the beach in West Cork in Allays. And I went down there to try and write a novel, and I had nothing. I had no idea what I was going to write a novel about. And going for walks up in the Caha Mountains every day going, what the hell am I going to write this book about? And one day almost fallen into a hole in the ground, which was part of the abandoned copper mines up there, and kind of starting to read up about them. Kind of an eerie kind of a place, the abandoned mines, kind of not as well fenced in as the abandoned mines are here. Yeah. You could easily fall down one. And just reading up about the story and how they went, thousands of miners went from West Cork at that time, because it was just coincidence. The mines in West Cork played out in the 1880s.
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone heard you can get $5 and $6 a day in Butte, Montana. if you go over there and the work is filthy and dangerous and you're 6,000 feet up in the rock. And that's the thing that strikes you. It's hard to go anywhere with a job as dangerous and as physically challenging as mining. But when you grow up at sea level, to go and do it at 6,500 feet is another whole level of hardship altogether, you know?
Yeah.
And in winters that we wouldn't have anything like back in Ireland. We have wet, miserable winters, but we don't have that negative 30 kind of stuff you get here, you know? So it was...
A lot of rain in the winter
Yeah.
over there, right?
It just goes grey and kind of murky. I call it grey season, you know.
Yeah.
We don't get anything as nice as snow and those crisp blue winter skies. It's just kind of, the whole countryside goes to sleep. It's nice when the spring comes in, but it's kind of a... So it was very interesting to think about physically what those miners went through in the 1890s to come over here, you know.
Yeah.
Very, very, very challenging. But when I came to Butte first in October 99, like I came on a Greyhound bus from Seattle, and I got in at about 6 in the morning, and I walked up through town, and there's a place called the M&M open.
That's the first place you went.
And I fell in the door of the M&M, and immediately, I always believe you immediately get the heart of a town and the feeling of a town.
Yeah.
You know, there are sad towns and happy towns, and Butte immediately felt warm to me. Very open, very friendly. The fact that you show up here with an Irish accent really helps. You know, I guess I don't know. I'm 56 now, and I suppose you become a bit more reserved as you get older. But at the age of 30, I wasn't reserved at all, and I was literally going up to people here in bars and cafes and on the street, going, "I'm writing a book about this place. What can you give me?" You know, and people were really, really warm. And bringing me to their houses and bringing me drinking and feeding me and introducing me around the place, bringing me to the archives in town, you know.
Yeah.
I was digging into the whole story of the place back in the 1890s. And I just got great material. I knew I had great material for a novel, that era in Butte was a great stage setting for a novel. But I had no idea how to do it. And I made a brave effort. I wrote 120,000 words. God bless me, you know, and I went back to Cork. But I knew even as I was writing it, this isn't good.
No.
The people don't feel real. They don't feel alive. And you know what it was? And I've been talking to this about a few people here this week. I think I got too much in Butte. There was so much history here. It was so...
Just overwhelming.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you didn't know how to, what do you focus on?
Yeah.
You know, because there was the mines, there was the bars, there was the mix trying to infiltrate themselves into the police apparatus of the city and the politics, and all that was really interesting. Yeah. The labour strikes, you know, the sex workers, the opium trade, everything was going on, and how the hell do you focus in on one part of it? And when I finally came to have a second attempt at the book, it was 22 years later, and I'd managed to write 6 other books in the meantime. So I had more skill as a writer.
Yeah.
And I thought what I have to do with this is really shrink it down and really reduce it down. And I just had a little idea of a young man and a young woman on a horse, riding double and trying to escape from someplace quick. And I thought, runaway lovers. What if it's Butte, Montana they're trying to get out of in 1891? Then I had my characters. And once you have the characters... Like, with a novel that's set in the past and in a very vivid place with a great atmosphere like Butte, how do you make that world come to life? And I think the secret of it is you have to make the people real.
Yeah.
If the reader buys the people, and if it buys the characters in your book, they'll buy everything else around it. So it just took a long time for the characters to come to me. One of them is an Irishman who takes up with another man's wife, but she's only just married the other guy, so it seems innocent enough, you know.
And it's funny you say you came into the M&M, because the M&M was kind of famous for you could sit at the counter, the old M&M before it burned, but actually before when Charlie owned it, before it closed down and then opened up a little while later, and it was never quite the same 24-hour place again. But there was a time, and maybe
at that time, I think in 1999, it had been continuously open.
Yeah, they didn't have, when they closed it, probably around 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lock for the door. They had to padlock it.
I remember I came in that first morning, and the lady behind the counter who was doing me my eggs over easy or whatever, and she was telling me the story. She said, "Yeah, it never closed," you know. And I said, "Wow, since 18, whatever." She said, "Yeah, it's been a long shift," which sounded like a pretty practiced line. I think she'd thrown it out once or twice, but it's. I was sad to hear about the fire a few years ago.
Yeah,
that was a shame. It's nice that they saved the sign, and I know there's. I think is there an effort to kind of rebuild and kind of.
I'm not really sure if they'll. If there's enough money to rebuild it.
The new one is gone, like side. And it seems very busy as I've been passing.
Yeah, it's
so
got
been
the
great.
M&M feel. And of course the M&M feel is like you might have on your right, you might have a district court judge.
Yeah.
And on your left, you might have a homeless person.
Right.
I mean,
It's a democratic space.
And everybody's the same.
Yeah.
I mean, LC behind the bar treated you exactly the same, no matter who you were, as long as you weren't giving her trouble. If you're giving her trouble, then you were.
I remember when I was on my first trip, and I'd been in a couple of times to the M&M. And somebody said to me, "Listen, to really get the vibe of the M&M, you've got to go in at midnight on Saturday." Okay,
Yeah.
now but be careful. He said, there could be brawls and stuff in there. Yeah. I thought he was kind of winding up the tourist a little bit, But I went in late on Saturday night, and I was sat at the bar with a beer. And sure enough, inside about 30 seconds, two guys took off from their stools and started throwing haymakers.
Yeah.
And the rest of the bar just completely took this in their stride.
Yeah, just
Didn't even look over the shoulders.
Yeah, that's some of the things you've seen in the M&M. Yeah, would probably. I mean, I'd imagine the stories. You could probably write a book just based in the M&M.
A question for you, Bill. What's the oldest operating bar in Butte now? I've passed the Helsinki, which I mentioned in my book, because that was gone in late 1880s, I think. That was the Finn's bar.
Yeah, that's probably it.
That would probably be the Helsinki, maybe.
I would think so. Maloney's has a sign that established something, but they just made that.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, because it wasn't even Maloney's in the 70s. It wasn't even Maloney's. It's established like 1854 or something like that.
Did you grow up here, Bill, in Butte?
I did. I grew up in the hill right below the con mine.
Okay.
In Corktown, which we never called it Corktown until I was older. That's my grandpa told me it was Corktown, and now that's kind of like the thing now to call it Corktown again.
Oh, really? It's come back into fashion to call it Corktown.
Yeah, because it was just Centerville. We called it. We didn't. We didn't care. It was Butte. We didn't. We didn't care about.
And Dublin Gulch, is that more going up towards Walkerville
Yeah, well, the Dublin Gulch is where the Kelly Mine is sitting.
Right.
In there.
It's,
there's no houses there. That was Butte's first neighborhood. Actually, I was involved. I ran for chief executive in a fight to try to stop them from dumping waste from cleanup in the Dublin Gulch, because I'd like to see people be able to get in there, because which is funny thing is it wasn't named the Dublin Gulch because of the Irish people that lived there. It was named there because down below they had stable horses that would pull the mine cars up, and they had to double up. So they call it. It was a doubling.
Oh
Gulch.
Man!
But everyone just said Dublin,
right?
And all the Irish people thought they were saying Dublin.
Oh, it's Dublin Gulch. So it just kind of stuck. Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't realize that.
And it turned out it was mostly Irish families that lived there too.
Yeah.
And
it was very poor. That was a poor part of Butte, I think.
Pretty much every part of Butte was poor back then. It was. Well, I guess some miners did better than others and stuff, but but it was. There's no rich people came out of the Dublin Gulch.
Yeah.
It's been 50 years or so since any families lived there.
Yeah.
But it's I grew up right over the ridge from it, right over a mine dump.
Yeah.
We'd go sneak in there and play quite a bit. It was great. But my family, I thought it was kind of cool they call Corktown, because my family, at least I thought they came from Cork. My brother kind of says no, there was more Kerry.
Right.
But
neighboring counties on top of each other.
Cork and Kerry, but everybody, which I know them to get because of the song Cork and Kerry Mountains.
Right.
And but I think a lot of people that came here, they thought they came from Corny Cork because that's where they left from.
In West Cork, and there's a great rivalry between, especially out in West Cork, where those mines were, and Kerry, based on Gaelic football. And they get at each other all the time. So West Corkmen would traditionally call themselves, they say, we're like Kerrymen, but we've got shoes.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good rivalry. That's awesome. And you grew up...
I grew up in Limerick City.
Okay.
So just further up the road in the Midwest, and I moved to Cork City in my early 20s. I was there for most of a decade then. So that's around the time I started to travel out to West Cork and hear about all these Harringtons and Sullivans and all these people out there. And I remember actually when I got to Butte, I stayed up in the Capri Motel, as it was at the time.
So you went
now
fancy.
Now the Motel 6. And I think it had the saddest palm tree in America.
Yeah.
outside.
I think-
It wasn't doing well, that palm tree.
Yeah, they transferred that in at some point. I think in the 70s, and it could have been 60s, but it was dead my whole life.
I thought the Capri was fine when I stayed there, but this week I've been back and people have asked me, where did you say? I said the Capri. They go, oh my God. I came out of it. Has the rash cleared up yet?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it wasn't the best place but I don't know. That we never had a reputation as being good, but I'd never stayed in it, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, the weird thing, I guess, was because I was traveling on the Greyhound, I showed up to check into the Capri, not in a car. And I didn't realize when you show up at American Motel on 2 feet, they kind of do a double take. You know? Who's this guy looking for a room? You know?
Yeah. So did you heard of Butte then when you were young in Ireland?
The story about all the Cork miners going to Butte, it's kind of well known in County Cork and in the southwest, but a lot of people around the country wouldn't be that aware of it. So it was interesting when the novel came out in Ireland last year and got around talking about it. A lot of people wouldn't have been that aware of the story. What's interesting, I guess, with Irish immigration always to North America is it's very often the pattern that people from the same small villages and towns go to the same part, often for like work-related reasons. Like all the fishing people from Waterford went to Newfoundland, and so you've got that crazy old Irish accent that still exists out in Newfoundland. I was out there a month ago, and it's like listening to Waterford fishermen from the 1890s. You know, it's completely preserved in the salty air out there. But all the West Cork crowd then went here, of course, and I was sure when I came back and you could see it in the people. You could see that Irish heritage. There's a particular type of Irish head. And my father used to call it a big boiled ham of a head. And you could see it, and it's like you'd see guys walking along the street here, and they might be wearing a Stetson, but that's like a West Cork farmer. You know, who's coming now, the same walk and all that. You can't get away from that stuff, you know.
So that could be where I wear a size 2XL hat when I fit on.
Big heads, that's our problem. That's our burden.
So I could blame that on the Irish part of it, which, you know.
It's the brains. It's all the brains we're carrying around.
A lot of I gotta. We'll stick with that story anyway. Yeah. So did you talk about football? Did you play, which is we call soccer, obviously? And
yeah.
did you play
There are two
football?
types in Ireland. So there's football, soccer, and then there's also Gaelic football, where you can pick it up in the hands as well as kick it. Gaelic football is very big in Cork and in Kerry, some parts of the West Coast. Hurling with the sticks is played all over the country. That's a tough game.
I've watched it a few times.
We call it stick fighting, you know. And like they used to play without the helmets until a few years ago, and it was always like mass fatalities every Sunday around the country.
A lot of teeth missing.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I played everything up till about 12 or 13, and then became the classic kind of bookish kid, you know.
Oh yeah.
More into books and sort of into music and stuff like that. So I never brought any sporting prowess to any sports field or game, apart from the pool table. I was a good pool player as a teenager. Yeah.
You read a lot of books. Did you read a lot of fiction, a lot of nonfiction?
I did. Yeah, I got into that phase, and when I think like a very important time for anyone who's going to be a writer or a musician or an artist of any kind is those kind of teenage and late teenagers. Your brain is like a sponge at that time, and you're really soaking up all these influences. And God, I would read 4 and 5 novels a week at that time. You know, I would really horse through them. You know, and it was kind of it was great. And came, you know, I knew that I wanted to kind of write. I think like in common with a lot of writers, I had some great English teachers in secondary school, our equivalent of high school. You know. A great guy, Mr. Lynch, who just passed away the other year, and he used to say to me, you write off the cuff, it's very natural to you. You know, there's no effort in it. So you could think about doing something like that, you know, and it's, I don't know, it's hard, like when you grow up in a place like Limerick, which when I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s, was pretty depressed. It was economically depressed, a lot of unemployment, there was a lot of crime trouble, there was a lot of sort of kind of feuds going on around town at that time. It's very different now. It's in a great place now, but at the time it was like city of 100,000 people, and there was like one novelist in town. You know, and when there's only one guy in your town who's doing it, it doesn't seem like a very likely thing to pursue yourself. It seems like saying I'm going to be an astronaut. You know, so I fell into newspaper work. Is how I started off. Really, I did start a degree in college. But very soon after that, I was offered a job at a new local newspaper as an old-fashioned cub reporter, like doing the court meetings and doing the local council meetings and all that. It's great training, you know. You're out and about. You're seeing the way a small city operates, and you're talking to people, and it's very good training for a writer, I think.
Yeah, was it hard to be in the creative type to stick straight news when you're writing like that?
Yeah, and that was always a tension I guess I had within myself in my 20s, you know. And I was doing fine as a journalist. I was freelancing by my late 20s. At that point, I was doing a lot of the more kind of arts kind of stuff. I was reviewing bands and plays and interviewing musicians and artists and stuff. But I wanted to make it up, you know. I wanted to write fiction. And I kind of started in a half-assed kind of a way. I'd be writing a bit at 4 a.m, you know. But then I realised, I have to be disciplined at this. This has to be your main thing. And I slowly kind of beat that into myself. I knew I could write.
Yeah.
I always knew I could write good sentences and I could come up with stories. But the discipline of doing it every day when you don't feel like doing it. And most days as a writer, you'd rather be doing anything else. You'd rather be out, you know, weeding the garden or out on your bike or going for a swim or whatever it is. But what makes a writer is on those days when you go in and you attach your butt to the desk anyway and you sit there, you know. And it mightn't be going very well, but you're there, you know.
Yeah, and I write, you know, on my website, I've been a sports writer for 25 years. I write a weekly column on my website, and I, you know, do some sports stuff.
Was it newspaper stuff, Bill, that you worked in?
Newspapers, and then ButteSports.com when the newspapers started to fade a little bit. But 14 years at the Montana Standard, 10 years at ButteSports.com. So now when I write a column,
and did you do all sports or was it?
It was all sports because I graduated from UM journalism degree, and I just focused on sport. It was just that. It was more fun.
Yeah. I did a little bit in my time, a little bit of sports writing, mostly about soccer. But it was never a specialty.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you're writing something, like I sit down to write a column, if I'm not in a good mood, it's hard to write. You know, like if my kids do something to piss me off. I got to go for a long walk. You know, I got to call them. I got to post. You know, advertisers have paid to be on this column on Tuesdays. I got to get something done. And if something throws you off, it's probably hard sometimes as a writer like that when you're not in the right frame of mind.
Well, you know, there's a writer, a novelist I go back to a lot, the late Hilary Mantel, the English novelist who passed away a couple of years ago. And she said something once that struck me as very true. She said, if you go to your desk 7 days a week writing, it'll seem to be going well 1 day a week.
Oh, really?
Most days it feels kind of sludgy and slow, and you're just kind of sat there. And the County Sligo rain where I live now is coming down on the Velux window of the shed, you know, and it's like, I'd love to do something else, but it's those are the days you're really making the commitment to it, you know. Yeah. And a lot of it, we're writing fiction, it's kind of, it's going on in the back of your mind. Like writing fiction, writing novels and short stories and plays. I think the only thing it's close to in life is dreaming.
Yeah.
And we're all brilliant storytellers when we're dreaming. No effort. Yeah. All this crazy stuff happens. These scenes, this dialogue. And we could just do it when we're asleep. And we wake up and we can't do it.
Yeah.
And as a fiction writer, in a weird kind of way, is what you're trying to do is you're trying to put yourself in that dreamy place in your waking hours.
Yeah.
You know? It's a weird business. It's a weird way to try and make a living. It's uncertain when you go fishing in there every day, if you'll get something. And most days it just feels like hard, frustrating work. But maybe 1 or 2 days a week, you get a lovely hour where suddenly the hand feels kind of guided across the page. And you know, this 300 or 400 words I wrote this morning, that's good.
Yeah.
And that'll go into the next book without needing much editing or anything. And those days are worth a lot, you know, when you get one of those. It keeps you going back for more punishment.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the difference between writing fiction and nonfiction is fiction, you probably get more writer's block.
Yeah.
Because you got to create the story. Nonfiction, you're researching and you're...
I still do an amount in nonfiction, as in I write sort of essays and stuff like that, and I find it very hard work. Yeah. Now to go back to the non-fiction. Oh, yeah. I like to invent now, you know, and I like to, I've got used to that kind of the mysteriousness of that and the kind of uncertainty of it. But it's the great thing about writing non-fiction, about writing an essay or a short piece on any topic, is you're learning all the time you're writing it, and you're really learning what you think about that in a way you haven't realised until you actually start to write about it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard work. I feel writing an essay is like pushing that rock uphill. You know, it's very hard work, but it can be very good for you as well.
Yeah, Mike Royko, who was my biggest influence as a writer,
Okay.
he used to write columns
Yeah.
in Chicago,
Right.
You know, and they're syndicated.
So I know the name. So what era was he, Bill? He was
60s through late 60s through early 90s.
Right.
You know, he wrote 5 columns a day for the.
so
Daily-
5 columns a week coming out.
5 columns a week.
Yeah.
A day. So he wrote for the Daily News, then the Tribune, then the Sun Times.
Right.
Or Sun Times, then the Tribune.
And the other great sports writers of that era, people like
Well, he
Jim-
wasn't a sports writer though.
Oh, he was
just-
across the
Yeah,
board.
he was just a straight up columnist.
Right.
And he wrote a book it's called Boss, about Mayor Daley in Chicago.
Right.
And when he was, because he'd write and he did it on typewriter. So just the pause of changing paper.
Yeah.
He had to throw him off, and he hooked up. He had a box of a printer paper that was all attached together, and he jammed that in his typewriter, and so he just kept typing, so he never had to stop.
Wow.
With a change of a paper, which I couldn't imagine writing on a typewriter.
My favorite Mayor Daley story from Chicago is when the great Chicago novelist Saul Bellow was given the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Yeah.
The mayor was asked to comment, and the local reporters, he was a famous Philistine, so the local reporters mischievously asked him, "Have you read the latest Bellow novel, Mr. Mayor?" And he said, "I've looked into it."
I've looked into it. That's all. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So you travel much? Then you spend most time in Ireland.
Yeah, well, as I became more of a freelancer and not so much tied to staff jobs and newspapers, I started to travel quite a bit. I wrote quite a bit of travel journalism. I came over I started visiting. My trip to Butte in '99 was my first trip to the US, but I kind of got the bug a bit and started coming a lot and writing about it. So I came over for the Bush Gore election in 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Writing
That was a
colour,
fun one, yeah.
writing colour pieces to send back to the Irish Examiner newspaper in
No,
Cork.
no kidding. Huh?
So what I told the Irish Examiner was that I was travelling around the country to different parts, but in fact I found a very, very cheap hotel room out in Santa Barbara, and I was just on the beach for 2 weeks watching TV back in the hotel room and pretend, Dateline sort of Arizona, send these columns back. But it was an interesting election to cover. That was the hanging Chad and the whole thing.
That was a crazy month.
That was the start of all the trouble, that election, in a way. All the divide in American politics at the minute, I think, kind of a lot of it kicked in around then, didn't it?
It just keeps getting crazier every day.
Oh, yeah.
I remember thinking back then, I wish Mike Royko was around to talk about this, because his take would be so good. And then it doesn't even seem like that registers on the crazy scale anymore.
That era, the great kind of columnists and the great voices, like there isn't an equivalent now, is there?
No, I don't think there is. No, and not one that people go to. I think a lot of it too was everybody got up and read the newspaper.
Yeah,
more. And now
figures like what was the New York Irish guy, Jimmy Breslin.
Yeah.
They were national figures, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did he stand for mayor or something at one stage in New York? He did something crazy.
Yeah.
Himself and Norman Mailer, the novelist, decided Mailer was going for mayor and he was going to be his deputy or something like that. Something cooked up in an Irish bar some night, but it was...
Yeah. No, so you've traveled a little bit around the U.S.
A good bit now. At this point, God, I think I've done about 38 or 39 states. I love coming. I've always had an affinity with the rainy northwest. You often come into Irish skies, grey skies. But no, I love to travel here and to move around the place. It's funny what Butte has now that other places don't. You go to a lot of American towns and cities now, and they seem kind of the same.
Yeah.
They seem generic. It's the same kind of coffee shops and the same kind of. Stuff on every street
and everything.
Yeah, and man, I passed through Bozeman last week, and wow, you can eat your dinner off the street out in that place now. It's so polished and and lovely bars and restaurants and all of that. But Butte still feels more real, I think, in some ways.
A lot of character.
It's got a lot of character, It's never going to go down that gentrification road to any degree like places like Bozeman and Missoula.
Yeah,
because you got the great Berkeley pit to stop all that happening.
It's scary. Well,
scare them off.
We've had a lot of Bozeman. That's what we talk about a lot. Is the Bozeman's so expensive now? people work in Bozeman,
moving out,
and they live in Butte and they drive to Bozeman.
It's crazy when you see that. That's a thing that's become in my trips to the US over the years. Yeah. That sort of sense of the California crowd move out to Bozeman, and Price the Bozeman crowd out. The Bozeman crowd moved to Butte, and and just this all it where does it stop? You kind of thing.
As I goes at the end of August, we had a scare with the water.
I read about
Middle of,
that. I read about that. Yeah,
and that was probably good for our cause for getting rid of gentrification, because that stuff like I've always figured maybe just a little leak of the.
I told this story the other night when I was doing an event, the reading at Montana Tech, which was great fun. We had a lovely crowd there, but it was. When I arrived back in Butte for the first time in 26 years last Thursday afternoon, I got off here on Park Street. I was looking for some coffee. And the first thing I saw on my return to Butte was 3 very happy, shiny-looking young people coming down the street with their yoga mats under their arm. And I thought, this place has changed. There were no yoga mats in Butte in 1999.
Yeah.
And the coffee is pretty great here now that you can get and all of that stuff. But I think in a funny kind of a way, there's a nice balance where Butte is now.
Yeah.
It has improved an awful lot. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on in kind of the artistic community here, creative people moving here and stuff like that, and that's fantastic to see, and it's really good for the place. But you don't want it to see it to go that full extent, into the kind of the fancy stuff. But I don't think it will. Yeah.
I'd imagine, and you mentioned that having the Irish accent in Butte.
Yeah.
I kind of figured that was like, we used to joke, before all the girls knew who I was, I wanted to go into the Vuvilla wearing a hat or whatever the Butte Copper Kings parent major league team was, so the girls would think I was a baseball player and I would come talk to you. But I imagine an Irish accent would be kind of gold in a place like Butte, because Butte, there's still a fascination with Irish because
there
heritage
is.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Probably more than other places you've been, that people probably are drawn to you because of your accent.
One of the great things that I've always remembered from my first trip in '99 was, I think it was on my last morning in town, and the guy who was bringing me around a little bit, I believe it might have been the late Kevin Shannon.
Oh, he is my grandpa's cousin.
Wow, I think it might have been because I was talking to Ellen, who ran the Butte Archives, and I was telling her about the guy who was bringing me around. She said, I'm pretty sure that was my dad.
Yeah.
Because on the last morning, he said to me, I presume someone has brought you to meet Yank. And I said, who's Yank?
John the Yank, yeah.
So it was John the Yank Carrington. So he said, come on, we'll go down. I'll see if he's there. And we got in, and Yank let us in, and he was 99 at the time. And I remember he said to me, I just had my flu shot. I can give you 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And he talked for 4 hours.
Oh, did he?
And then took down his fiddle and started playing me Irish tunes. And he played me, Believe Me, If All Those Endearing Young Charms, made famous by Count John McCormack in the 1910s. And I always thought about him when I was finally writing the proper book. It stuck with me. But like his story was amazing.
Oh, he's incredible.
He moved here from, I think his parents were in Utah until he was about 5, moved to Butte, moved back to West Cork in Ireland.
Yeah, and they called him the Yank.
They called him the Yank with the American accent. Was in Ireland for the War of Independence and all that, then came back out. And he was telling me, I think, did he work at the Finland Hotel for many years? Or one of the hotels, and remember JFK on his visits and all of that. He had great stories.
He would always come in, like I told you, that the 2 hours after the St. Paddy's Day parade with the Dublin Gulch, they'd always bring him in. They brought him in right before he died.
I was told during the week he played his last gig at the age of 101.
Yeah, and his last song was Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
that's what he'd always close with that. And he had with the accordion.
He got to about 102 or something, I think. Did he? Something like that.
It was
fantastic.
Just a tremendous guy and a great story. And Kevin Shannon was, his first cousins with my grandpa Jerry. Wow. And the difference between those two, because my grandpa Jerry one time told me, I don't know why Kevin gets so caught up with that Irish bullshit. But because Kevin was, he was an unindicted co-conspirator in the shipping arms thing in the 70s.
Wow.
They were supposed to testify. He held as hostile witnesses and stuff. And I as I told Ellen, I had Ellen on my podcast early on when I started doing it. I asked my grandpa Jerry if he thought Kevin Shannon was part of that shipping arms to the IRA. And my grandpa said if it involved Kevin giving his own money, he's an innocent man. But he was such a great storyteller, Kevin was, and Ellen too. Ellen, she did so much that you got to see what she did with the archives.
Yeah, I was amazed. I was back in the archives giving a little talk again the other day in there, and it was it's amazing what they've done with the place.
Yeah.
I was in there in '99, and it was just kind of a reading room.
Yeah,
and I found great stuff. But now it's
I
beautiful
think they
building.
built on that extra building.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Which was an architecture's kind of nightmare because nothing was square.
Right.
On the old building, and they added next to it. It was
A lot of these buildings downtown, Bill, are in the uptown or whatever we call it around where we are now on Park Street. 1890s would have been would that be kind of right in around there?
Right around then, yeah. And my dad calls it downtown.
He would call it downtown
because he lived right by where I grew up. You know, he in Corktown, so he called it downtown. And my grandma says going downtown because Park Street was the big deal then.
And do people say the flat or the flat?
The flat's flat.
Yeah, flats, yeah.
And so that's kind of downtown now, and they call it historic Uptown Butte. But a lot of the older people in Butte still call it.
Would call it down.
They call it downtown.
Downtown,
But,
wow.
Which is kind of funny that downtown's up on top of a hill.
Yeah.
But so 1890s. I mean, that's a great era for a book. I always thought like around 1817. You know, we had the mining. They blow
the
up
silver mines and stuff.
The blowing up of the miners' union hall, the speculator disaster, stuff like that would be a good era if I had a time machine.
Yeah,
what
you'd like to see.
Yeah. But what was it about the 1890s that?
Do you know what was really interesting? I think was you could see that it was the very kind of first kind of iteration. It was our world starting. You know, like the country was being electrified. That's why there was the rush on the copper. The first photographic studios were being opened in town. In my book, the lovers meet in a photographic studio. It's very, very significant because for the first time in human history, very ordinary working class people are thinking about how they look and how they present themselves because they can go and have their portrait made. The rich people have been thinking about this for centuries. They've been having oil paintings made of themselves. But now every working Joe and Jane can go get the photo taken down on Granite Street. And Dussault, I think Alric Dussault, a French-Canadian guy, was the first big photographer in town. And send the photograph back to the mother in Cork. You know, he's doing fantastic. He's like a prince out in Montana. So it's interesting. For the first time, people were thinking about their image and their clothes and how they looked, you know. And it was a really time when things were opening up. But what was fascinating about Butte, even though it was a small city at that time, I think about 30,000 in 1891, it was so cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
Because wherever there were miners in Europe and South America and in Ireland and in England and in Cornwall, they heard about Butte. $6 a day. Well, what was the story you heard? Now, if you were back in Ireland where the mines had played out and you were just either sheep farming or fishing, you wouldn't have made a fraction of that kind of money. So you could see that was great money for the time, so the temptation was there. I was reading a bit during the week in some old books about Butte, and one of the interesting things that I hadn't realised was how quick the workforce at a lot of the mines turned over, like 40% turnover month by month.
No kidding.
So guys wouldn't last long often in the mines, or guys would work it for a month or two, make some money, you know, go off do other things or go home with the money and things like that. So it was like, when you think about the physical, you know, extent of that work and how hard it was, it's quite awesome, you know.
Yeah, and it wasn't exactly 8-hour days back in those days either. They that was a job.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine even attempting to do it.
Yeah. Well, my Irish hero in the book is put down the mines when he comes there and he lasts 3 hours, you know, so he decides he's a poet instead. That's probably the route I would have gone in 1890s.
Absolutely, yeah. If I did figure out how to rhyme, if I had to go down those mines. But so when you're doing the research, you're reading a lot of newspapers, accounts, and
and like the problem back then that I had in 1999 was there was just so much good stuff, you know.
Yeah.
There was so much great stuff about Butte. Any direction you looked in back into history, it was the depth of it, you know. Things like the Frank Little story and all of that, and Dashiell Hammett, the crime writer working as a Pinkerton detective.
Yeah.
And apparently, I don't know how true the story is, but originally someone came to him and said, we want this guy taken out, we want Little taken out. They asked Dashiell Hammett to do it before whatever hard guy as it was hired for the lynching of Frank Little. I went down to visit the grave today and it was very touching.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, it was very touching to see that it's visited all the time. and people leave kind of mementos
Yeah.
of labour history and union caps and things like that. And we left a couple of Irish mementos down there today as well. It was very moving to see it.
Yeah, he probably never would have dreamed that he would be remembered for so long.
Yeah.
It was 108 years later.
Yeah, 5 days in Butte. I didn't realise that. He was only here 5 days
Yeah.
when it happened.
Yeah, and my great grandfather Mick Foley, he was he took a rider, came into town for the speculator fire,
Right.
and then he was down at the scene after Frank Little. He wasn't very old,
Yeah.
but and he was. There was a writer, Mark Ross, came to town. I don't know if
Right.
you've heard of Mark Ross, and he interviewed my grandpa, and my great grandpa, and he had and I never got to know him because the Irish stubbornness. My grandpa and my great grandpa didn't talk
Right,
for years, so I didn't know him.
Irish
well.
family feuds, man.
Yeah, but he apparently he knew he had the names of people who hung Frank Little. And I think a lot of people probably did back in his
Yeah.
But he wouldn't tell him.
Yeah.
He was 95 years old.
Yeah.
And he thought he was going to get whacked if he told
Yeah.
that many years later he wouldn't talk about Frank Little.
Yeah.
He told
I guess
Mark,
I guess the presumption has always been that it was like hired heavies that the Anaconda Company or whoever it was sort of put on the job. But it's kind of a crazy story, and there's so many of those crazy stories in Butte when you go back into it, And I said the other night, I was talking to some writing students came over from Missoula the other day from the university. I was talking to them and I was saying, like in lots of ways, the history of Butte, in terms of people writing stories about it and making songs, it's only barely been scratched, the surface of it. There's so much, I was saying, the great resource in these hills now is in the stories of the place, and the histories of the place, and so much that's really emblematic of a lot of American history over the last 150 years. You can trace into the stories through life in Butte and what was going on in Butte.
I think there's so much history that we kind of take it for granted, and the stories we have, like you
Do
obviously.
they teach it in schools here, like in the high schools? With
They
the
do
kids
teach Butte history. We
yeah.
had Chris Fisk was great. Now they got a new Mr. Hoffman does it, but Chris Fisk was great at teaching Butte history.
Yeah, very important,
Wasn't
yeah.
there when I was there, but my kids had him.
Yeah.
And really, really cool stuff. Like he had a sleepover at the Cabbage Patch, and they learned all this stuff. But I still think we take it for granted in a lot of ways. And like you probably Kathleen McLaughlin put me in touch with you.
Yes.
She's maybe the best journalist in the whole world. She's just incredible.
Kathleen is phenomenal, and she brought us out to the Frank Little today, and has given us so much stuff about.
But she talked when I had her on my podcast. She was my second guest on this podcast, and she talked about the story of the legs in Butte. And I don't know if she brought that up because there was years ago there was a pair of legs, like right from waist down, that were found in Butte, and they never. I mean, they finally, like after more than a decade, they finally identified the victim.
Wow!
But never found the rest of them, and it was like a story like, oh, they found a pair of legs. And
only in Butte.
Yeah, and they just shrugged their shoulders and forgot about it.
Only in Butte, man, I tell you.
So, and I have no idea, and they still don't know where the rest of them is or whatever. And it's it's a terribly sad story, but it's just the Butte's reaction, the way it just was like nothing.
That story does remind me of my all-time favorite tabloid headline from the New York papers, which I believe was a New York Post, and it was "Headless body found in topless bar," and that'll never be beat.
It seems very hard to beat. Headless body found in topless bar. Yeah. That is awesome. I wish I had written that headline or anything near that. Yeah. So now your book, it came out last year, you said?
Yeah. So The Heart in Winter it's out in paperback now at Doubleday, and it's been great actually to finally get it out, and to be happy with it, and it's gone down really well. I've got great letters from Butte about it since the book came out here a year ago. Lovely letters from people who've read it in Butte, and so many connections with Butte coming in Ireland on the email, from people who have family connections going way back into the place. A lot of it. Like there was even by the early 1990s, there was 10,000 mix in the town. So those family connections spread out, and a lot of people have been on to me. So it's been really nice. Yeah.
That's good, and it seems like it's getting good reviews. I just first heard about it a little over a week ago when Kathleen sent me a text, and I guess the best way I could say is I'm looking into it. But I do plan to check it out.
Great.
And because it's any book about Buttes, I I devoured the books about Butte. You know, like Mile High, Mile Deep. I think my favorite one, which Mile High, Mile Deep's kind of a lot of truth in it, but fictional.
Yeah.
You know, and but my favorite one is Michael Punk wrote
Fire and Brimstone.
Yeah, and that is an incredible book.
My wife's reading it at the minute, and she's been raving about it to me. Kathleen gave us a copy of it the other
Did
day.
she? Yeah, it is incredible. Yeah, it's it just the way he weaves the history and just how close.
Apparently, I've been told it's very well written and everything.
And I've been trying to get a hold of him to get him on my
He'd be great.
podcast because I think
he went on and he wrote The Revenant. That
Yeah.
movie, The Revenant. Yeah.
So he's living in
Interesting guy.
Missoula, I think, and I followed him on Twitter and he followed me back.
Oh, so that's
and
the
I sent
start.
him a message and I haven't heard back. But I'm going to keep hitting him
Fantastic.
up because that's such a great book and I learned so much. Like B.K. Wheeler, was an attorney in Butte and he was almost the president of the United States because he was on the short list to be the vice president when Truman.
Yeah.
For FDR, but then they kind of they butted heads. It's all in the book and stuff. So it's pretty crazy times, and it just kind of talks about all of Butte's history. But it's kind of a different setting, though. You're writing a novel set in a real scene.
Yeah. And I like when I was kind of writing it, I thought the one thing to make this real, to make this world real for people, is make the people feel real.
Yeah.
And the element of life in Butte in the 1890s that I tried to really tune into was the lonesomeness of migrant workers.
Yeah.
That great lonesomeness that they carry with them, all the way across the Atlantic and all the way out here to get here and then go 6,500 feet up. It's lonesome stuff. And they were coming, and there was no women here. So prospects of marriage and family and all that were kind of distant and all of that. And
so a lot of drinking and fighting, right?
There was a lot, and there was a lot of, people, and there was a lot of opium use and all that. And this is always where there's very hard physical work.
Yeah.
And people are in physical pain. That's where you find the opiate use.
Yeah,
it's relief that people are looking for. But no, it's I finally managed to narrow my focus on the book and just really kind of tighten the lens on it and get the story right. I feel so. It was kind of
Was it something that was hanging over you for a while?
I didn't really think about it. I just kind of put it out of my mind, and occasionally I'd hear something about Montana or something about Butte even, and think, oh, that one I abandoned. But you never really abandon anything as a writer. It's always kind of hanging around.
Yeah.
I do remember when Deadwood started on TV.
That was so good.
Great show. Yeah. And I remember thinking, that must have been about 2006 or 2007. I remember seeing that and thinking, God, that's how you do it. You know, that level of profanity. That's how you get the Irish and Butte talking. But it was, it didn't really come into my mind until madly out of the blue that day, when I was thinking about these two runaway lovers and where would I put them in the world. I thought, God, Butte, Montana,
Yeah. So, are you working on your next book now?
Yeah, I write plays as well. So I just had a play on in Dublin during the summer, a play called The Cave on in the Abbey in Dublin. And I'm kind of slowly sidling my way into the next novel now. I kind of enjoy the first drafts, where it's kind of loose and you're kind of not sure exactly what the story is, but you're just kind of sketching bits in every day. And that's kind of nice, It's kind of a little bit loose. The second year it'll get much more kind of intense when you're kind of focusing down on something. But it's nice. I'm enjoying it. Hopefully it'll come out for me.
Yeah, and when you're doing fiction, you can do whatever you want, right? You just
this is it. And I'm lucky enough. It's all that I do is write. I don't teach or anything on top of it. I live in County Sligo in Ireland, in the kind of rural northwest.
Yeah.
And the great advantage is we bought an old house that was half fallen down, so it's a small mortgage.
Yeah.
So I could just get away with just doing my writing, and it's a good place to be. It's a former police station.
No kidding.
Yeah, from the 1840s. Yeah. So we've got the ghosts of lots of tortured Fenians back in there, in the shed where I work used to be the holding cell in the police station, but unfortunately there are no ghosts. That would give me a book.
That would be a great book. And you don't dress like a right, you don't have the sports jacket and the scarf.
No, I tried to keep it pretty casual. I tried to keep it pretty casual.
Someone wouldn't say, I'm looking for the writer around here. No one would point right
at you. Incognito, man.
Yeah, it's kind of a pretentious look, I guess, probably the writers probably have sometimes.
No, I keep it fairly easy going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So, and you live in Port
Sligo.
City now?
No, I'm in County Sligo, so we're up kind of on the west coast in from the Atlantic. Beautiful place, very wet place. 300 days a year, we have at least some rain. Every shower in off the North Atlantic breaks up on the mountains, you know.
Yeah.
But when the weather is good, it's beautiful. It's nice. January and February, I wouldn't advise it.
No, that's
Kind
worst time, huh?
of got very murky. The whole place goes to sleep. But it's it's a nice place to be.
Summer months probably the best time to visit.
Yeah, often kind of late spring and early autumn, fall
Yeah.
is kind of the driest and the nicest, you know. It's funny when you live in any place, I guess people in Butte feel the same, that has inclement weather and has bad weather. You forget about it all as soon as the sun comes out. You forgive everything, you know.
Yeah. So this was so your book's out about a year now, and coming to Butte, was this kind of like the final tour of it for you to
Kind of,
bring-
yeah. I've most of the kind of events and readings and done now, and I'm kind of focused on the next thing. So in a way, like, yeah, I guess if I'm
kind of closes the chapter for you?
it kind of does, and in a very nice way. I couldn't think of a better way than doing it, really, than coming back to Butte. And
Yeah.
I feel grateful to the place, you know. I feel like it gave me a good story, and it did so in a very kind of warm and open-hearted way. Starting with that very first morning visit to the M&M, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do feel a debt to the place.
Yeah, that's awesome. You plan on coming back?
For sure. Yeah. You get the bug. I hope to come back again before too long.
Yeah, and you came back at a nice time of year too. I mean,
It's
not
lovely now,
too
isn't it?
hot. Yeah.
Not too hot when the sun comes out
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, but it's lovely.
It can be very bad this time of year, though. This is a very nice
Right.
October so far.
Well, even there was a big change last weekend. Was kind of murky, wasn't it? And then it kind
Yeah.
of turned nice during the week. So yeah.
Yeah,
Like, is this your last warm spell? Do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't snow until, I remember golfing on December 5th one year.
Wow. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
because it wasn't warm.
But you could get out,
It was
yeah.
dry.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where you got a foot of snow on Halloween.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
so it just kind of depends on the year.
Yeah.
But it's never more than 5 minutes away from being really cold.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's the weather fluctuates pretty well.
You're tough. You'll survive it. You'll
Yeah.
survive it out here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a little easier to survive these days now than it was back in the
Yeah, I
1890s
bet.
anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But my family, that's probably around the time when some of my family members came here.
Yeah. And were they all in the mines? Is that
A lot of them were in the mines. My Foley side of the family came, from Cork or Kerry, depending on if you ask me which brother I ask.
Right.
And my mom's dad came from County Armagh.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
and-
There was another bunch of miners up there.
Yeah, he went through Canada.
Right.
They came down there. So yeah, it's pretty all sides of my my family, and then my grandma on my mom's side, her dad was a shift boss at the Speculator, and he was actually
Right.
he was just working a different shift when the fire was, so he was one of the helmet guys.
Wow.
A helmet man, I think they called him, that went down
Okay.
looking for survivors and stuff.
God,
And
yeah.
he of course he passed away long before.
Yeah.
I had a chance to meet him, but would have loved to have.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have this podcast equipment to
Wow.
talk, just talk to him. Even my grandparents, I wish would have had it to
Yeah,
record
yeah.
the stories. But
So how long are you going with the podcast, Bill?
it's been 3 years now.
Fantastic. You get a lot of listeners and stuff who tune in and
Yeah, I think it does pretty good for being a local podcast. It focuses on Butte.
Yeah.
And go a little bit out.
Yeah. Well, I think what makes Butte very Irish as a place is, like, Irish people love the sounds of their own voices.
Yeah.
And we love to tell stories, So I think that trait is definitely in Butte, which is good for podcasting.
Definitely, I just don't have the Irish accent to get the crowds.
Yeah.
Which-
You can't rent it, man.
No, it's something you're born with. There's been a few people that moved to Ireland. There's one girl who went to school a year or two ahead of me. She moved to Ireland, and I talked to her like 15 years after high school at the M&M.
Yeah.
And you'd have swore she lived in Ireland her whole life, but
Right.
I don't know if you'd have heard that accent, if it was
Yeah.
natural from living there or if
Yeah.
it was a faked one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a few Irish around town. I remember meeting a few in 1999 when I was here. I was brought to the Irish Times bar one night,
Yeah.
which I think has since burned down.
Yeah,
there
there's
was
a
a
fire
fire or
there,
something.
yeah.
I met the guy up in Sean O'Donnell's. There's an
Irish
lovely,
Johnny, yeah.
lovely guy working there.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit in Irish last night in Sean O'Donnell's. His Irish is better than mine. I'll tell you now, but it's nice to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. I know you got to run here, so congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Bill.
And I can't wait to check it out and more of your work.
Thanks
as
so
well.
much, man.
And Yeah, I'll never forget the name Kevin Barry.
I can't forget that one. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, Bill. Thank you.
Jewelry Design Center. We want to be your jeweler for life.